Chief Engineer Emma Thompson stood in the galley of the deep space vessel Wandering Fork, staring at what was supposed to be beef stew. The gray, lumpy mess sitting in the bowl looked more like wet concrete than food. She poked it with her spoon and watched it jiggle like rubber. "This is getting worse every day," she muttered to herself. Emma had been dealing with failing food systems for 3 months now. When they first left Earth on humanity's most important mission ever, the protein synthesizers worked perfectly. They could make anything from chocolate cake to roast chicken, all from basic molecular compounds. But something had gone wrong during their long journey through space. The machine that was supposed to create delicious meals now produced gray paste. Sometimes it was lumpy gray paste. Sometimes it was smooth gray paste. But it was always gray, and it always tasted like cardboard mixed with motor oil. Emma heard footsteps behind her. Captain James Williams walked into the galley, his face showing the worry that had been growing stronger each day. He was a good captain, but even he couldn't hide his concern about their upcoming mission. "How bad is it today?" he asked, though his expression suggested he already knew the answer. Emma held up the spoon with the gray blob still clinging to it. "Remember when we thought yesterday's attempt at chicken soup was the worst thing we'd ever seen?" Williams nodded. "Well, I was wrong. This is supposed to be beef stew, but I think it might actually be alive. It's been moving on its own for the past 10 minutes. The captain sat down heavily in one of the metal chairs. Through the large window of the galley, stars streaked past as their ship traveled faster than light toward their destination. In just 2 weeks, they would arrive at the meeting point where representatives from the most powerful civilizations in the galaxy would be waiting for them. "Emma, you know how important this mission is?" Williams said quietly. "This is humanity's first real chance to join the galactic community. The Culinary Council controls trade routes, communication networks, and peaceful relations between hundreds of worlds. If we mess this up..." "I know," Emma replied. "No pressure at all, right? Just cook dinner for the most sophisticated food critics in the known universe while our food machines are producing what looks like industrial waste." She had been an engineer for 15 years, working on everything from space stations to planetary mining equipment. But somehow she had also become the ship's cook when their original chef got sick and had to stay on Earth. Emma was good with machines, and she understood how the protein synthesizers worked. That should have been enough. But the synthesizers were breaking down in ways that made no sense. She had run every diagnostic test she could think of. She had replaced parts, recalibrated settings, and even tried talking nicely to the machines. Nothing worked. "What about the emergency food supplies?" Williams asked. "We have enough basic rations to keep the crew alive, but you can't serve military ration packs to galactic diplomats. That would be like showing up to a royal wedding wearing dirty work clothes." Emma walked over to the main synthesizer and opened the control panel. Lights blinked in patterns that should have meant everything was working perfectly. But the machine was lying. She knew it was lying because she had watched it turn perfectly good protein compounds into something that belonged in a waste disposal unit. "Captain, I have an idea," she said slowly. "It might be crazy, but it could work." Williams raised an eyebrow. "At this point, I'm willing to listen to any idea that doesn't involve serving gray paste to our alien guests. The experimental quantum matter reorganizer in Lab 7. We brought it along in case we needed to make emergency repairs to the ship's hull. But the basic principle is the same as food synthesis. Both processes rearrange matter at the molecular level." The captain was quiet for a moment, thinking. "That equipment is experimental. We don't fully understand how it works." "I know, but I've been studying the technical manuals for weeks. The quantum fields can manipulate matter in ways our regular synthesizers can't. Maybe I can use it to create food that's actually edible. And if something goes wrong?" Emma looked back at the bowl of gray goo. How could it possibly be worse than this? At least if the quantum reorganizer fails, it fails in interesting ways. Our current food systems are just boring failures. Williams stood up and walked to the window, looking out at the stars. Emma knew he was thinking about their mission, about the weight of representing all of humanity in their first meeting with advanced alien civilizations. The Galactic Culinary Council didn't just judge food. They judged entire species based on their ability to create, appreciate, and share meals. For them, cooking was about more than nutrition. It was about culture, creativity, and the ability to bring different beings together around a table. If humanity could prove they understood this, they would be welcomed into a community that spanned thousands of worlds. If they failed, Earth might remain isolated for centuries. "Do it," Williams said finally. "You have 2 weeks to figure out quantum cooking. Use whatever resources you need." Emma felt excitement and terror in equal measure. She had never worked with quantum technology before, but she was tired of watching their mission fail because of malfunctioning kitchen equipment. "Thank you, Captain. I won't let humanity down." As Williams left the galley, Emma looked at the quantum reorganizer manual she had been carrying around for days. The technology could manipulate matter at levels smaller than atoms, creating possibilities that regular machines couldn't achieve. She had no idea what she was about to discover, but anything had to be better than gray paste that moved on its own. Emma spent the next 2 days turning Lab 7 into her new kitchen. She moved the quantum matter reorganizer to the center of the room and surrounded it with cooking equipment. The machine looked nothing like a normal food synthesizer. Instead of smooth metal surfaces, it had complex crystal formations and spinning rings that hummed with energy. The first thing Emma tried to make was scrambled eggs. She placed basic protein compounds into the reorganizer's chamber and set the quantum fields to rearrange them into something that should have been simple breakfast food. What came out was definitely not normal scrambled eggs. The yellow mass on her plate seemed to be fluffy and runny at the same time. When Emma looked at it from one angle, it appeared perfectly cooked. From another angle it looked raw. From a third angle it seemed burned. All of these states existed together until she tried to take a bite. The moment her fork touched the eggs, they collapsed into a single state. Unfortunately, that state turned out to be a rubbery mess that tasted like old socks. "Okay," Emma said to herself, "quantum superposition doesn't work well with breakfast foods." Her second attempt was tomato soup. She programmed the reorganizer to create a simple, warm, red soup that any human would recognize. The machine hummed and whirred for several minutes before producing a bowl of liquid that looked normal enough. Emma picked up the bowl and immediately noticed something strange. The soup was flowing backward. Not just cooling down but actually moving in reverse through time. She watched in amazement as the liquid returned to its separate ingredients, then became the original compounds she had put into the machine. "That's not supposed to happen," she muttered, checking the quantum field settings. Nothing should be able to move backward through time. By the end of the second day, Emma had created food that existed in multiple dimensions at once, a salad that changed color depending on who was looking at it, and a piece of bread that was somehow both stale and fresh until someone tried to eat it. None of it was actually edible. On the third day, Emma decided to try something different. Instead of trying to make complex dishes, she would start with something basic. She placed a simple chicken breast into the reorganizer and programmed it to create a perfectly roasted piece of meat. "Just make normal food," she said to the machine as she activated the quantum fields. "Nothing fancy. Nothing that breaks the laws of physics. Just chicken." The machine hummed louder than usual. The crystal formations glowed brighter, and the spinning rings moved faster. Emma watched the readings on her control panel as the quantum fields rearranged matter at levels she could barely understand. After 10 minutes, the reorganizer finished its work. Emma opened the chamber and found something that was definitely not chicken. A small, dark sphere about the size of a meatball sat in the chamber. It was perfectly round and seemed to bend light around itself, creating a strange visual effect that made Emma's eyes water if she looked at it too long. "Well, that's new," she said, carefully picking up the object with a pair of metal tongs. The sphere felt lighter than it looked, as if it was made of something that didn't quite obey normal rules of mass and weight. Emma held it up to the light, trying to figure out what had gone wrong with her chicken recipe. As she examined the strange meatball, it slipped from the tongs. Emma watched in shock as the sphere fell toward the metal floor of the laboratory. Instead of bouncing or breaking, it passed right through the solid metal as if the floor wasn't there. She heard a soft sound from below as it continued falling through the deck below that, and then the deck below that. Running to the floor where the meatball had disappeared, Emma found a perfectly round hole about 2 inches across. The edges were smooth as if someone had used a precision cutting tool. But even as she watched, the hole began to close. The metal flowed back together like liquid, sealing itself completely. Within 30 seconds, there was no sign that anything had happened. Emma ran her hand over the spot where the hole had been. The metal felt normal, with no trace of the opening that had just existed there. She grabbed a scanner and checked the area. According to her instruments, the metal had never been damaged. "Okay," she said, her voice shaking with excitement and fear. "That's definitely not supposed to happen." She spent the next hour trying to figure out where the meatball had gone. Her scanners couldn't detect it anywhere on the ship. It had simply passed through every deck and disappeared into space, leaving behind holes that sealed themselves instantly. Emma made another meatball, this time paying careful attention to every step of the process. The quantum reorganizer seemed to be creating matter that existed in a different state than normal matter. The meatballs could pass through solid objects without affecting them, except for leaving those strange holes that healed themselves. She tried dropping the second meatball on purpose. It fell through her laboratory table, leaving another perfectly round hole that sealed itself immediately. The meatball continued through the floor and disappeared. By the end of the day, Emma had created 12 of the strange spheres and tested them on different materials. They passed through metal, plastic, and ceramic with equal ease. Nothing seemed able to stop them or hold them. She sat in her laboratory, looking at her notes and trying to understand what she had accidentally created. The quantum fields were doing something to matter that she couldn't explain. Instead of just rearranging molecules, they seemed to be changing the fundamental nature of how the matter interacted with the universe. Emma had no idea that she had just invented the most dangerous weapon in galactic history. She only knew that her attempt to cook dinner had created something that could pass through solid matter without leaving permanent damage. It seemed harmless enough. After all, what could possibly go wrong with a meatball? The dining hall of the Wandering Fork had been transformed for the most important dinner in human history. Emma had spent 3 days decorating the room with Earth's finest tablecloths, candles, and flowers grown in the ship's greenhouse. Everything had to be perfect for humanity's first meeting with the Galactic Culinary Council. Captain Williams stood at the head of the long table, wearing his best uniform. His hands were slightly shaking, though he tried to hide it. This dinner would determine whether humanity would be welcomed into the galactic community or remain isolated on their small blue planet. The alien delegates had arrived that morning in ships that looked like floating works of art. Emma had watched from the observation deck as 3 different vessels docked with their ship. Each one represented a civilization so advanced that humans could barely understand their technology. Now those same aliens sat around the dinner table, and Emma felt her stomach twist with nervousness. The first delegates were tall, elegant beings that looked like they were made of living crystal. They came from a star system called Zephyr, and they spoke by creating beautiful musical tones that the ship's translator turned into words. Their leader, whose name sounded like wind chimes, had explained that they judged other species by the harmony they could create through food. Across from them sat 3 warriors from the Pyrian sector. They had red skin that seemed to glow with inner fire, and they treated every meal like a battle to be won. Their commander, who had asked to be called Fire Tongue, kept examining each dish as if it might try to attack him. For his people, eating was a test of courage and strength. At the end of the table sat the most mysterious guests of all. The umami masters looked ancient and wise, with large eyes that seemed to see everything. They rarely spoke, instead communicating through small tastes of food that somehow conveyed complex ideas. Emma had been warned that they could judge an entire civilization's character by experiencing a single bite of their cooking. "Honored guests," Captain Williams said, raising his glass, "welcome aboard the Wandering Fork. Today marks the beginning of a new friendship between humanity and the galactic community." The aliens responded with their own gestures of respect. The crystal beings created a harmony of pleasant musical tones. Firetongue slammed his fist on the table and roared approval. The umami masters simply nodded, their ancient eyes watching everything. Emma began serving the first course, her hands trembling slightly as she placed plates before each guest. She had spent days preparing this menu using her quantum cooking methods. The results were unlike anything that had ever existed before. The salad changed colors as each alien looked at it, shifting through shades that matched their emotional responses. The crystal beings hummed with delight as their plates turned beautiful shades of blue and silver. Firetongue's salad became bright red and orange, crackling with tiny sparks. The umami master's plates showed deep, rich colors that seemed to contain hidden meanings. The second course was soup that existed in multiple dimensions at once. Each guest experienced different flavors depending on how they approached the dish. The crystal beings tasted musical notes. The warriors tasted the essence of honorable combat. The umami masters tasted memories of perfect moments from across the galaxy. Emma felt hope growing in her chest. The aliens seemed genuinely impressed by the impossible foods she had created. Maybe her quantum cooking experiments would actually work. For the main course, Emma proudly presented her latest creation: perfectly cooked steaks that had been prepared using quantum fields to exist in the ideal state of doneness for each individual guest. Alongside the meat, she served her mysterious quantum meatballs as a special appetizer. "These represent humanity's newest culinary innovation," Emma explained nervously as she placed the small, dark spheres on each plate. "They're created using quantum matter reorganization techniques that we developed specifically for this occasion." The meatballs looked innocent enough, sitting quietly on the elegant plates. They had the same light-bending properties that made them slightly difficult to focus on, but Emma thought this added to their mysterious appeal. Firetongue examined his meatball with the intensity of a warrior studying an opponent. He lifted it with his fork, sniffed it carefully, then looked at Emma with respect. "A food that challenges the very nature of reality itself," he said approvingly. "This is true warrior cooking." Before Emma could explain that the meatballs were meant to be eaten slowly and carefully, Firetongue popped the entire sphere into his mouth and swallowed it in one gulp, as was the custom of his people when showing respect for a dish. For a moment nothing happened. Firetongue smiled and nodded at Emma, apparently enjoying the taste. Then he began to fade. It started slowly. Firetongue's red skin became slightly transparent, as if he was turning into a ghost. His voice became distant and echo-like, though he was still sitting right there at the table. "By the eternal flames," he said, his words seeming to come from very far away, "I can taste the space between flavors. I exist in the realm between eating and hunger." The other aliens leaped to their feet in alarm. The crystal beings created harsh, discordant tones of fear. The umami master's eyes widened with something that might have been terror or amazement. Firetongue continued to fade until he was barely visible, like a shadow that existed just at the edge of vision. He was still there, still talking, but he seemed to be speaking from another dimension entirely. "The flavor transcends all understanding," his ghostly voice continued. "I taste colors that have never existed. I experience the essence of cooking itself." Captain Williams looked at Emma with panic in his eyes. The diplomatic dinner had just become a disaster of cosmic proportions. Emma stared at the remaining meatballs on the other plates, finally understanding that her quantum cooking had created something far more dangerous than she had ever imagined. The most important dinner in human history was turning into humanity's first intergalactic incident. Within 6 hours of the dinner disaster, Captain Williams stood in his command center watching the worst nightmare of any diplomat unfold before his eyes. The main screen showed dozens of alien warships appearing out of hyperspace, their weapons powered and ready for battle. "Captain," called Communications Officer Robert Davies from his station, "we're receiving urgent messages from 17 different civilizations. They all want to know about our quantum warfare cuisine, and they're demanding immediate explanations." Emma sat in the corner of the command center, her head in her hands. Firetongue's voice still drifted through the ship's walls from whatever strange dimension he now occupied, occasionally offering unhelpful commentary about tasting the music of the spheres and experiencing flavors that exist beyond time itself. "This is Commander Steelclaw of the Void Syndicate," came a harsh voice over the communication system. "We demand that you surrender the phase shift technology you have stolen from our ancestors. Your food weapons use our sacred ability to move between dimensions." Williams looked at Emma desperately. "Do we have stolen Void Syndicate technology?" "I have no idea what the Void Syndicate even is," Emma replied miserably. "I was just trying to cook dinner with a quantum reorganizer." Another message came through the speakers. "This is Fleet Admiral Crystal Song of the Zephyr Federation. Your weaponization of matter phase manipulation violates 47 different galactic peace treaties. Surrender immediately or face the consequences." Science Officer Alice Morgan looked up from her sensor readings with growing alarm. "Captain, I'm detecting over 200 ships now. They're from civilizations we've never even heard of. Some of them look like they've been traveling for weeks to get here." Emma stood up slowly, her face pale. "Captain, I think I need to tell you something. I didn't just make one batch of those meatballs. I've been experimenting for days." Williams felt his stomach drop. "How many did you make?" "I created 17 different varieties," Emma admitted quietly. "Each one uses different quantum field configurations. The rosemary and thyme ones create temporal loops when eaten. The ones with garlic cause the eater to phase through multiple dimensions at once. The curry-spiced ones affect local gravity fields." From somewhere beyond normal space, Firetongue's voice echoed through the walls. "Oh yes, the curry ones are magnificent. I can taste the weight of planets and the lightness of stars." Davies frantically worked at his communication station as more messages poured in. "The Crystalline Empire wants to know if we're planning to weaponize their molecular structure. The Ancient Assembly is demanding we explain our assault on the fundamental laws of reality. And something called the Council of Eternal Hunger is asking for our complete surrender and all our cooking recipes." "Cooking recipes?" Williams asked in disbelief. "Apparently they think we've developed the ultimate weapon disguised as food," Alice explained, reading through the intercepted communications. "Half the galaxy believes we're planning to conquer them using weaponized dinner parties." Emma walked to the main view screen and stared at the growing fleet of alien warships. Ships of every imaginable design floated in space around them, from elegant crystal vessels to massive metal fortresses covered in weapons. Some ships seemed to be made of pure energy, while others appeared to exist partially outside normal space. I need to show them that this was an accident, Emma said firmly. Let me demonstrate that the meatballs aren't weapons. Absolutely not, Williams replied immediately. We're not feeding experimental quantum food to hostile alien fleets. Another communication came through, this one from a ship that looked like it was built from living metal. This is Warmaster Iron Fist of the Battleforge Collective. Your quantum food weapons have ended our 1,000-year war with the Flameheart Empire. We demand to know how you created technology that can phase warriors out of combat entirely. Emma blinked in surprise. Their war ended because of my meatballs? Davies nodded, reading through more messages. Apparently several civilizations have declared temporary ceasefires to deal with what they're calling the human quantum food threat. Some of them are more worried about us than they are about their traditional enemies. Firetongue's ghostly voice drifted through the room again. I can see the connections between all things through the flavor dimension. Wars are just disagreements about taste preferences when viewed from the eternal kitchen of existence. That's really not helping, Williams muttered. Alice looked up from her sensor station with growing concern. Captain, I'm detecting massive energy buildups from the alien fleets. I think they're preparing to attack. Wait, Emma said suddenly, let me try something else. Maybe I can reverse the effect on Firetongue. If I can bring him back to normal space, maybe they'll believe this was just an accident. She ran toward her laboratory, but before she could leave the command center, every alarm on the ship began screaming at once. Alice's voice cut through the noise with barely controlled panic. Captain, new contacts approaching from deep space. These are bigger than anything we've seen before. The main screen changed to show massive, dark shapes emerging from the void between galaxies. They moved like living things, but they were larger than space stations and seemed to be made of pure darkness that absorbed all light around them. What are those? Williams asked. Unknown, Alice replied, her voice shaking. But they're heading straight for the nearest inhabited star system. And Captain, they're consuming everything in their path. Emma stared at the screen in horror as the dark entities devoured asteroids, space debris, and even light itself. Behind them, the various alien fleets suddenly seemed much less concerned about humanity's quantum cooking and much more worried about the cosmic horrors that were approaching inhabited space. Firetongue's voice echoed one more time through the ship. Oh my! It appears something very hungry has come to dinner. The galaxy suddenly had much bigger problems than weaponized meatballs. The massive dark creatures moved through space like hungry shadows, consuming entire asteroids in single bites. Emma watched from the command center as the beings approached the nearest star system, where billions of people lived on peaceful planets. All fleets report the same thing, Davies called out from his communication station. Conventional weapons pass right through those creatures. Missiles, energy beams, even nuclear bombs have no effect at all. Captain Williams stared at the screen as the alien fleets that had come to fight humanity now worked together desperately to stop the dark entities. Ships from dozens of different civilizations fired every weapon they had, but nothing could touch the creatures. They exist partially outside our reality, Alice explained, reading her sensor data with growing fear. They're like Firetongue now but in reverse. They can interact with our universe when they want to feed, but our weapons can't hurt them because they phase out of normal space. Emma suddenly stood up straight, her eyes wide with realization. That's it. They're like Firetongue but opposite. If my meatballs can push someone partially out of reality, maybe they can also pull these creatures fully into it. What are you thinking? Williams asked. The creatures can only be hurt if they're forced to exist completely in our dimension. And the only thing we know that can affect beings existing between realities is my quantum food. Emma was already moving toward the door. If they have to fully enter our reality to digest quantum matter, they'll become vulnerable to normal weapons. Firetongue's ghostly voice drifted through the walls. The eternal hunter becomes the eternally hunted when forced to feast at reality's table. For once that actually makes sense, Williams muttered. Emma ran through the ship's corridors to her laboratory, which had been converted into the strangest kitchen in galactic history. The quantum matter reorganizer hummed with power, surrounded by cooking equipment and 17 different types of experimental meatballs stored in special containers. She activated the ship's communication system. This is Engineer Emma Thompson calling all ships. I have a plan, but I need every vessel with food preparation equipment to follow my exact instructions. Human vessel, came the reply from Warmaster Iron Fist. This is no time for cooking experiments. Those creatures will reach the Zephyr home system in 6 hours. That's exactly why we need to cook, Emma replied, beginning to prepare her quantum field generators. I'm sending you the technical specifications for quantum food preparation. Any ship with matter reorganizers can adapt them to create what we need. Emma worked frantically to modify her cooking process for large-scale production. Instead of making small batches of experimental meatballs, she needed to create enough quantum food to feed cosmic horrors the size of space stations. Davies, she called over the intercom, tell every ship in the fleet to start preparing food using my specifications. We're going to serve dinner to some very unwelcome guests. Within 2 hours, the strangest battle fleet in galactic history was ready for combat. Human engineers worked alongside crystal beings and flame warriors to convert food synthesizers into quantum cooking devices. Even the ancient umami masters contributed their knowledge of flavor science to enhance the quantum effects. The lead creature had reached the outer planets of the Zephyr system and was beginning to consume the rings of ice and rock around the gas giant. Each bite it took made the entity grow larger and more solid as it fed. All ships, this is Captain Williams, came the command over the fleet communication system. Launch quantum cuisine in 3, 2, 1. The first wave of attack consisted of Emma's temporal pot roast projectiles. The dark creatures, attracted by the quantum energy signature, moved to consume the strange food floating in space. The moment the first entity bit into the pot roast, it became trapped in a time loop, constantly eating the same meal over and over again while becoming more solid with each bite. It's working, Alice called out excitedly. The creature is becoming fully solid. All ships, open fire on target 1. The combined firepower of hundreds of alien warships struck the trapped creature, and for the first time, their weapons had an effect. The entity writhed in pain and surprise as energy beams and missiles actually hurt it. Emma launched her second wave, dimensional dumplings that existed in multiple realities at once. 2 more creatures consumed the dumplings and found themselves scattered across several dimensions simultaneously, unable to focus enough to continue feeding. The curry-spiced meatballs next, Emma announced, launching her most experimental creation toward the largest creature. The massive entity consumed 3 of the curry meatballs in 1 bite. Immediately, the space around it began to warp as the creature's own gravity started pulling it into itself, creating a feedback loop that trapped it in its own gravitational field. Firetongue's voice echoed from wherever he existed, "Beautiful. They taste their own hunger and become consumed by their consumption." The battle continued for hours, with Emma coordinating a fleet-wide cooking operation while fighting cosmic monsters. Her quantum shepherd's pie caused one creature to exist in all possible states of being eaten at once, creating a paradox that banished it to a pocket dimension. Her experimental quantum soup made another creature so confused about what it was supposed to be digesting that it simply stopped moving entirely. The final creature, the largest and hungriest of all, required Emma's ultimate creation. She combined all 17 of her meatball varieties into one massive quantum feast that contradicted every law of physics she understood. The creature consumed the impossible meal and immediately became caught in every quantum effect at once. It existed in the past and future simultaneously while being partially in multiple dimensions and trapped in temporal loops. The paradox was so complete that the creature simply vanished from reality entirely, taking its cosmic hunger with it. When the battle ended, the galaxy was safe. The alien fleets that had come to destroy humanity now cheered for Emma's quantum cooking. She was awarded honorary membership in the Galactic Culinary Council and offered her own restaurant. 6 months later, the Quantum Kitchen opened as the first interdimensional restaurant in known space. Firetongue worked as head waiter, still partially phased but finally able to describe flavors that existed beyond normal reality. Every meal came with a comprehensive safety waiver, and Emma's cookbook became the most classified document in galactic history. The universe had been saved by accident, 1 meatball at a time.